We're live.
Didn't want to work for. Oh, here we go. Well, welcome to our online platform called Conversations. This has been going for several weeks now. We've had some really fruitful, in-depth conversations over the last couple of weeks. 2 weeks ago, we had Matt Young from Fresh Hope join us when we were speaking about slowed down spirituality. Last week, we had Mark Chappell from Greater West for Christ / Penrith City Chapel. And he was in talking about integrity and leadership. And this week we thought, because there's been a fair bit of conversation in regards to the church's posture when it comes to our online realm, we wanted to actually take this opportunity to be able to talk about the potential fruits that might actually come out of this realm, that might come out of this environment that we're looking at. But what we're actually looking at doing is going in as much as possible into the potential that we've got right at our hands here, which is good. So, welcome to this week, and I'm hoping that you've started to gain a fair bit of traction when it comes to this online realm. And one of the things that we want to explore is why have we decided as a church to go away from just doing the normal live streaming of our services, but what does it actually look like in getting the most out of this online platform? So, Ro, it's just me and you today. And one of the things that I did want to explain as we get into this conversation is that when COVID hit and the restrictions hit, one of the biggest things for us to be able to do, to be able to connect with people and to be able to still do our services, which was an absolute blessing, was to go live stream. And we live streamed our full services, including everything to do with the service, when it comes to worship, when it comes to the message, when it comes to everything that was happening in the building. And I think that was pivotal. That was vital in that time. But as we've said before, there is a season for everything. And at the beginning of this year, one of the things that we decided to start exploring was how can we, as a church, be able to connect is the first one. How can we do community healthy and the most fruitful in this realm? But what is it that we can actually do that allows us to interact and to allow the Spirit to move? So this is where the conversations come from. We believe, and we've said this over and over again, that that church is not just on a Sunday. It's not just on a Sunday. Family's awesome, isn't it? Is not just on a Sunday, but we sit there and we go, well, what does it actually look like to be able to have Spirit-filled conversations throughout the week and to be able to see what God is actually up to outside of what happens on a service? So that's where this got birthed out of. Rohan, I'll hand over to you just for the moment, just so that you could speak into that,
Yep.
and we'll go from there.
Just a reminder too, guys, please leave any comments or questions. If you want your name to show up, we can put the comments up into this video so we can all benefit from them. You just have to go to this streamyard.com/Facebook if you want them to use your name. Otherwise, you'll be an anonymous commenter. So leave any comments, questions, opinions, feedback, put them in the comments there and we'll put them up, because it's all about interactivity with this. We don't want it just to be a one-way thing. We want questions back the other way as well. So just a reminder about that. So Yeah, online. Do you want me to talk about maybe the shift, why initially we went from live stream back the other way to not live streaming, Adam?
Yeah, I think so. I think that would probably be probably a great conversation starter when it comes to how we actually do our community, as I was saying before,
Yep.
and what is it in that form of connection that we could get the most out of. What does it look like when it comes to our posture of just uploading the messages rather than the whole service? And what is the fruit that's coming out of, like, if people haven't seen the last 2 weeks, I think after this, I would encourage everyone to go and listen to them, because the conversations that came out of it, that they were unstructured, and I think were majorly fruitful when it comes to actually just discussing topics. So what does it look like because you're a big worship hearted person. What does it look like as we've taken on this posture of our online thing? What does it look like from a person in your shoes of our posture as of this exploration season?
Yeah, well, I think one of the first things to talk about in that, leading into what does it look like now, is just acknowledging that in a lot of these things where we follow where we feel like God's leading us, we don't really know all of the benefits or the fruits of that until we step into things. So the same with this. Initially, one of the first thoughts of or the reasons we stopped live stream was actually just to do with people's availability and the state of like fatigue or tiredness, because obviously COVID's been going for a long time. It was a huge task for our tech team to get that up and running. A lot of churches weren't able to do it, and if they were, they weren't able to do it to the extent that we were. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in that. So
a lot of unnoticed things, doesn't it?
Yeah. So massive task for all those people, and in a very draining season as well, where obviously we're locked down, we're not able to see family. So not only is it extra work, but it's on top of what we're all dealing with together. So coming into this, I guess I was able to potentially sense that a little bit more than when you're already in that environment. It's sort of like the analogy I had is sort of like it's like the boiling pot of water. If you just jump in, you can sort of sense a little bit more than if the water just keeps rising and it becomes normal. And so sometimes maybe our busyness or the pressure we put on ourselves to run a service on a Sunday, actually we don't necessarily know any different, which is sort of why it's a gift being able to experience the different parts of the body and what different parts offer, and to be able to think outside the box. So initially that was our heart behind that, was allowing people at least a break over that holiday period. And then we actually sensed, I think the first service or two, you were actually on leave as well, Adam, and then came back into that. And there was just a real sense of more intimacy and connection in that space. Not just because now you didn't have some of the tech team or those responsible for the service getting maybe a bit stressed about having everything on time, like having the countdown, okay, we're starting, but have it more feel like a family. And I guess the thing I'm reminded of is church is always comes back to family, and we want structure. We want to create a space which helps people engage with God, but we also don't want to create a product. We want it to be organic, about family, about connection. We don't want it all from the front. And so, actually out of, and I think this is the thing, is what I've learned is by engaging our limitations and actually embracing limitations, like Pete Scazzero says, not trying to exceed our limitations, we now meet God in a place we wouldn't be otherwise. So we actually meet God in our limitations, as Pete Scazzero would say. So in this scenario, we just went, okay, we're running short on people. It wouldn't be kind to force certain people to have to run the cameras for the 4th week in a row, or whilst everyone else is away, to keep it going. So maybe that's our limitation. So maybe our limitation in that area of our energy levels or our people and what they can produce right now, maybe that can dictate what God wants to do in this time.
Yeah, look,
not
isn't it amazing when we actually embrace the limits, the God gift of limits, that opportunities arise. And what I've noticed is, as we've stepped into this, even though that there has been probably mixed feelings when it comes to the online services and not streaming the whole thing, when we've actually embraced that that maybe we need to go in this new direction, we're not missing out on the message. People can still visit the messages and things like that. So when it comes to continuing on, it's actually empowered some people that don't normally get involved to start getting involved. And it's actually allowed people to start exploring different ways that maybe they've explored in the past, but because of all the duties that we had to do to make sure that the live stream was up and running and continuous, and that what we produced was good for people's households for that season. It's actually allowed people to start exploring more in the sense of that. Okay, well, I'm not online per se, but what I'm actually doing is actually serving where God has got me in the community, in as you said, that more of a family feel, the intimate feel of what church should actually be.
Yeah, and it sort of comes back to that family again with that, doesn't it? Because I guess the thing is the intimacy of family in your home or in a Christmas gathering with your extended family. It has a certain sort of vulnerability or an intimacy. Like imagine setting up camera for your, Christmas lunch with your extended family or your close family, and how that would maybe change the feel. Because I guess in every space, there's certain things. So it's the sacred space. And when something's sacred, it's often sacred because it's only experienced in the present. Like a present moment becomes sacred because we are present there. And I haven't quite figured it out, but there's almost like this sense that sometimes when we jump to putting it out there to everyone, we think we're reaching more people, but are we actually going deep together?
Or is there connection online?
Intimately.
Is that, look, I completely agree with where you're coming from there, Ro, because one of the things that I'm sitting there thinking is that we've gone through a whole season of this online screens, everything, because that's all we could do. But is there actual connection, or is it just ticking a box?
Yeah.
Like there is a moment of how we do church, and at the beginning of the year we did what is the point of church, and one of the strongest things that came out of that was, well, we are born in community, into a communal beings, and what does it actually look like to actually do church healthy? What does it actually look like to actually embrace each other in person? And the way that we've postured ourselves is that this online platform, being Conversations, it actually allows for these discussions that don't normally be seen, actually be seen. And the only thing from that is that we're able to make our services, our fellowship services, more of the sense of that intimate feel, more of that sense of, well, what does it look like to do life together? And then has opened up this exploration of these conversations, has opened up these explorations of what would it look like for people to be involved in a conversation like this, that allows people to start exploring outside of the Sunday fellowship service, outside of the structure that comes from what needs to be in services and everything like that.
Yeah. No, that's good.
I'm still hungry.
Hi, Ivy. Thank you.
All good, all good. So, look, when it comes, one of the things that I was that we've had a discussion about before in us actually starting this realm was what would it look like for people to interact here on this service, like on this platform, but also to interact on a Sunday in more of the in-person realm.
There you go, Ivy. Richard's written something to you. That's the great thing about this space is it's not it's primarily, even in this thing, about relationships and about, you know, real life. So
Yes,
we try
very
and do
much
it
so.
well in a way that we can communicate, but it's just a normal family discussion.
100% it is, 100%. So, look, I want to go back on to, and I want to hear more about the gift of limits, Rowan, because we one of the things that we have stepped away from is going, well, what does it actually look like to have the ability to be able to worship together in different spaces? We've got our encounter nights, we've got our fellowship service, our worship that we're able to do during those spaces. I think it has created a bit more of an intimate feel of it, but also embracing at the same time of this online realm, like you were just saying before. Like, yes, sometimes we can't be in the same building, but it doesn't stop us actually exploring things online. So that gift of limits has actually birthed something that maybe if we just did the norm, did what we were doing and just continued, that this would never have come about.
Yep. And I guess the thing is, the limits inspire more creativity or us to think outside the box in this case.
Yeah.
So I think the thing is, as well, is you can have, like, what are we trying to achieve today? And it was like your message on Sunday, Adam. You talked about being present in the digitally connected world.
Yeah.
So how do we present true relationship and connection and intimacy in a world that is more connected than ever digitally, but is more and more separate, more and more disconnected? So how are we more connected than ever, but more disconnected than ever? And I think there's the ability to go, how do we do that? Not by disconnecting from technology, like we're still online here, but how do we do it in a way that encourages true connection and builds connection? For example, as people, we long for connection, right? And we want to build towards that, but yet there's part of us that it's just easier to do what we do without the complexity of relationship, without the complexity of people. And so it makes sense to me that an online service is always going to be something that's easier to digest. Because I don't have to actually deal with, it's like the verse that says, bear each other's burdens, bear with each other. Like, we don't necessarily think of coming to church going, oh, I'm going to bear with someone today. Like, you think, I want to go and have a great chat to someone, and like, we have a different idea, and maybe it's easier to not have to step into that challenge if it just provides an alternative. And I think maybe sometimes that's the problem, is we've just thought of online as being a replacement for the physical.
Yes.
But online and being digitally connected is complementary to being truly connected with each other.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I think that Tim has just made a really fantastic comment there, in the connection for younger generations is defined differently, because they've grown up in that world. And as I said on the weekend, is that they embrace digitally framed environments a lot different to what the older generations, even our generation, Ro, when it comes to actually allowing for that connection to happen. But one of the downsides to this digitally framed world is that it's really easy to hide, isn't it? And I thought you brought up something fantastic before, Rowan, in the sense is that what do we go to church for? Like, what is the posture? What is the heart that we go to church physically in the building for? If what the content or the production that we can actually have online is exactly the same in the building, well, when we're in the building, we can't hide, or we can attempt to hide, but a lot of the times our postures actually come out. Like, we might be going through a circumstance where if we're online, we're unable to articulate what's going on, or we don't feel comfortable in actually sharing it. Whereas in person, we can actually have that one-on-one conversation, or we can have that something over a cup of coffee, have a meal together. And I think there's fruit in both environments, because I think us embracing a different outlook or a different posture when it comes to online and getting the most out of this. And I'm loving seeing all this chatter on our feed today, because that actually shows that even though we're all at different locations, which is a massive blessing that we can connect together in these circumstances and throughout our lives and doing lives. But when we do come together, there's that more intimate feel, there's that more intimate connection. And there, I believe, is where true transformation starts happening. Our eyes are opened in a different way. And sometimes, because it scares us, sometimes we can't hide in person. And that's when the vulnerability starts coming in, when we actually allow people to know us. So, yeah, I do agree with you, Tim, that the younger generations and the generations yet to come, they define connection in this digital world completely different.
Yeah, and I guess the question in that is just being digitally connected enough? And what does our mental health situation being higher than ever, our I can't remember the statistic, we heard it the other day, Adam, on how many people face loneliness. It was over half, wasn't it?
It was over half people feel that loneliness. Yeah. So it's on the rise as well.
Yeah. So there's something, I mean, I'm not an expert in all of this, but the question in me is that the connection we truly need and long for? It's not a bad connection to have 3,000 friends on Facebook that we can flick through their feed, but will it actually speak to that part in us that wants to be known and wants to know others in a deep way, in a way that we would explore in a formation group where we are actually vulnerable with what's below the surface? And I think there's this thing in us that goes like, I want that, but I'm also scared of that. And so even being, and I think it's not even just an online versus in-person thing, because we can meet in person and still do it that way. Like it's just, and yep, everything's fine. This is how a good Christian lives. So this is how I present myself at church. And so maybe it's a question to go even deeper and go, how do we create, what space are we creating when we meet together? And I just started listening to a book on, it's called How to Worship a King by Zach Neese from Gateway Church. And he's talking about how we are all priests. Our primary ministry to God is to be priests. And in that we have ministry to God primarily, but then we have also ministry to each other.
Yes.
And so it goes into that everyone in full-time ministry thing, that there's this false narrative that only certain ones are in ministry. So you and me,
Yep.
we have certain days set
Those
aside.
that are actually getting paid.
Yeah, and we're supported to do that. All of a sudden now, I don't have any responsibility, so I can just come to church, whether it's online or whether it's in person, and consume. I'll get what I need. I'll get fed. Whereas what if we're not truly satisfied until we've also given? I don't know if there was some statistics going around on like giving and generosity, and how when we give, we actually become more truly happy. And so I wonder if it's the same sort of thing. When we come and just consume, we're never fulfilled because we haven't actually become part of a larger story. But what if we're all invited to be the chosen people, the royal priesthood, and be like the Levites in the Old Testament? And it's spoken again about the New Testament, about the royal priesthood, right? Where our job is to minister to God, but also to minister to each other. And so on a Sunday, it's not about just one person preaching and one person leading worship and feeding everyone. It's actually about those interactions, about ministering to each other, which we can avoid doing even in person, but it's especially hard to do online. We miss those interactions, where it's a prayer in the hallway, where it's a smile, where it's a hug, those family interactions. And one thing about being an introvert, I've learned over time, is sometimes I think that I don't need people to be recharged or energized, because often I get energy from being alone, from resting, or from doing my own things. But I realized that if that doesn't change my need for people, and sometimes I won't feel like necessarily being around people or interacting, but I know from experience that if I don't, I end up in a place that I don't want to be. And then I end up hiding more and more and not letting myself be seen more and more. So the more I experience that, the more I go, okay, even when I don't feel like it, I need to engage people.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. I love your posture when it comes to that. That the little moments that can only be captured in person rather than online. And look, we need to embrace it because this is the world moving forward. This is what's actually going to happen. And if we're not actually exploring different methods and different ways, then are we actually missing what God is wanting us to experience as a church, but also individually for that transformation? Now, one of the things that I want to ask you, because we're going to start wrapping up now, is, well, if that's the case, if church isn't all about Sunday service, if church isn't all about turning up on a Sunday and interacting in that realm, then we've also got this realm. We've got Encounter. We've got our DNA groups, which is the smaller groups. We've got our journey groups, our formational journey groups. And there's so many other different ministries or environments that we've got within the life of the church. Why is it that we as leadership stepping into this realm of digitally and also one-on-one as well as community, why is it so important for us to be not stuck in our ways? Not if something's working for a season, but it doesn't work for another season. Why is it that we need to be flexible, especially in this online realm?
I think just because we miss out if we're not open to what God wants to do. If we're not open to experiencing Him in a different way, because ultimately, I think this is a lesson that I've seen through church history. If you study different things, different movements, different traditions, is often things come about because we want something that is tangible.
Yes.
So we're trying to understand this transcendent God who we can't quite grapple with, who shows up in different ways, even through the Bible, shows up in different ways all the time, and sometimes in a whisper, sometimes in a wind. So shows up in dreams, shows up in visions, shows up walking with people on the road to Emmaus. Like you can't predict the way that God shows up, right? And then we go, as soon as we experience God in one way. So, for instance, right, we didn't turn the lights on in church, or as this big cathedral, for instance, people gathering, believers gathering in a big cathedral, and they lit some candles and had all of these candles. And then that day they just happened to encounter a deeper part of who God was and are really blown away by the presence of God showing up. Then the next time they meet together, there's this temptation to go, oh, remember last time we had candles and, God really showed up? So then all candles become a tradition, consciously or subconsciously, because God showed up last time. Or I come to picking songs for this Sunday. The temptation is to go, oh, that song that we did last week really went really well. People got a lot out of it. It connected well, and God seemed to be on that song. The temptation is to just go, oh, well, I'll just do that again. Because we
repeat what works.
Yeah, we pursue the environment, or we pursue the closest representation we had of God, like an icon, instead of God, even though we always should be pursuing him more. So it's this idea, pursuing his presence always has to be what we're after. So when we meet together, what is our primary focus? And it has to be pursuing the presence of God. And Moses in Exodus 33 wrote a song based off this, but he's saying, you stubborn people, you go on to the promised land, but I'm not going to go with you. And he's saying stiff-necked people, as in people that won't bow to him, people that won't put him in a place of authority, which he wants, because that's the way you access the abundant life, is by living life the way God designed it to be lived in the kingdom. And they're going, you're not going to live the way I'm trying to tell you there is life. You go on, but I won't go with you. And Moses, in that instant, he says, if your presence does not go with me, I won't go. Basically, Moses chooses the presence of God over the promises of God. So it's the same idea there, where someone could pick the things God promises for their life, for us as a community, instead of the presence of God, or could pick the environment that they've maybe experienced God in before instead of the presence of God. So we're pursuing this God who cannot be constricted by time and space and is so much more vast than we could ever imagine. But we keep going back to what we did before all the time, because that's the only way we somehow think we can access him.
We associate what has happened with the environment, with the people that were in those environments, with what was happening, rather than what God was doing.
Yeah. So I guess that's what's on my heart, is how do we keep pursuing him? And to do so, we need to be led into different areas.
Yeah.
And it's not about, it doesn't even matter if it works or not. Like, it doesn't even matter if we try this online environment and then another 3 weeks we feel like, okay, that's done now. Like, it's not
so
about.
So what you're saying, Rohan, it's okay to fail?
Yep, exactly. And like someone once said to me, to many people, this is Daz Farrell, who we'll hear from on the 27th. He said, failure doesn't exist in the kingdom.
I love that.
Interesting
Absolutely
thought. Interesting thought to hold.
I think that probably is where we need to stop today. There's been some fruit out of this conversation, and hopefully this sparks people thinking differently rather than just going, okay, we're set in our ways, as you said before, the traditions, and sometimes the things that we think is what needs to stick around. We need to be flexible because God, a lot of the stuff that God is doing, we actually don't even see. So yeah, well, look,
it's both and, isn't it? It's the
yeah,
both
it is.
and too, Adam,
Yeah.
because it's not going. We're not going to ignore that stuff. And what I like to say to people is it's similar to the music that we choose to sing together. We don't reject some of the great old hymns, but we also got to realize that God's always got a new song, and we need to enter and eat the fresh bread that He's baking in singing our own new songs or singing newer songs, as well as the stuff we look back on that anchors us, the beautiful songs from the past. So maybe it's the same thing where we go, there's some things we'll always do together as a community, but then what's God leading us into richer expressions that He wants to work through as we meet together as a community.
Dude, I'm loving what God's doing in you, mate. I'm loving what is mulling over in your heart. So look, these conversations I think are just going to bring more and more of this out. So look, thank you all for joining us. I would encourage people to pass this message on for those that weren't able to join us live. And hopefully we'll see you guys all in person on Sunday as we continue to keep on exploring our new series called From the Heartbeat. See you all later, guys.
See ya.